Okay, well, I think we can make a start. Um, just by way of brief introductions, my name's Alexander Woods. I'm policy manager for the CQI. My sole function here today is to introduce today's webinar, and I'll help field some questions towards the end. So throughout today's session, do feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section. We'll curate those and pose them to the team later on. But before we start, I'd just like to give a quick introduction to Quality Careers Week for those of you who haven't joined us on one of the previous sessions. The CQI is offering a series of online sessions this week, which have been curated to support your career development and progression as a quality professional. During this week, we've had a number of sessions which shine a spotlight on the tools and services that the CQI has to offer, as well as to provide some insight into the quality careers market, the landscape that you're contending with as quality professionals, and the importance of a diverse workforce. You're still able to sign up to the remaining webinars for this week, so do please visit quality.org/events to see what else is available and to sign up. And any sessions that you will have missed earlier in the week have been recorded and will be made available by the CQI website. No more from me, save to say we're delighted to have Shirley Parsons with us this afternoon to provide an insight into the Quality Careers Market 2024. So with no further ado, I will hand over to Jessica Plested.
Thanks, Alex. So hello, everybody. Thank you for everyone for joining today. I know it's either lunchtime or you've taken time out of your busy schedule, so I appreciate that. So today we're going to discuss our recent findings from the 2024 Quality Market and Workforce Insight Survey. This was completed at the end of 2023, and the report was published at the beginning of this year in February. So we had over 600 quality professionals complete that survey. Some of you probably on the call as well, so thank you very much. I'm going to start off by introducing myself. So my name is Jess. I head up the Quality Careers Division at Shirley Parsons. I've been specialising in the recruitment of quality professionals for 6 years, and I work closely with the CQI supporting their projects. I'm going to pass you over to Jordan if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Harlow, the organizational psychologist at Shirley Parsons. So I deal with all of our psychometric testing, data analysis, team building, etc. I'll hand it over to Ben next.
Hi, everybody. My name is obviously Ben. I am one of the company directors and started the renewables part of the business.
Hi, everyone. My name is Omar. So I work here as a candidate manager, and I work closely with Jess in the quality team here.
Excellent, thank you. So the presentation today will last around 15 minutes. We will open up a Q&A session at the end. So as Alex mentioned, feel free to drop in your questions throughout the webinar. And there will also be a QR code as well at the end of the on the final slide for you guys to download the report if you haven't already done so. So moving on. So firstly, who is Shirley Parsons? Who are we? What do we do? For those that don't know, so we are a global HSEQ careers consultancy. We've been in business over 20 years, and we have about 150 staff globally. Shirley herself is a chartered health and safety professional, and she's in the office most days, and you'll see her at all of our networking events. Our head office is based in Aylesbury, which is in Buckinghamshire, and we've expanded globally over the recent years. And we now have offices in the States, Europe, Asia, Australia and New Zealand, and most recently in Ireland. Omar and I, we specialise in the placement of quality and audit professionals in the UK specifically, and that's on a contract and a permanent basis. The types of sectors that we place quality professionals would be essentially everything, but the main ones are the construction, civil engineering industries, nuclear defence, manufacturing, certification, services, and like I said, everything else in between. And the job titles are anything from quality coordinator to an engineer, an advisor, quality manager, senior managers, systems managers, directors, head of, you name it. We cover those as long as it's within like the quality function. So for future reference, those whoever do need require support with hiring, that would be myself, and those who are a candidate looking for their next career move, that would be my colleague Omar. So I'm going to pass you over to Jordan to begin the webinar, and then he will pass back to myself shortly to finish off. So over to you, Jordan.
Thank you. So one of the most important questions we always find when we do these surveys is to look at what's the movement in the market at the moment. Are people looking for jobs? How is that going? At the moment, we found that essentially 30% of individuals are looking at moving either now or within 6 months, which also means that roughly about half of all people are currently looking at moving within the next year. So that means that there's quite a bit of churn in terms of placements at the moment. People are looking, they're actively going out there. And that's something important to know, especially looking at retention of your own talent and looking at also how can you bring the talent into your own business. We'll bring to the next slide. Oh, sorry, it's just asked what language I'm speaking.
Oh, ignore that, Jordan. Katie said to ignore it, don't worry.
Just can't, yeah, sorry, just covering everything. The next bit we're going to look at is what factors are people actually looking at. So most people usually expect that salary would be the most important factor for most people, but we actually found that that's in 4th place. People mainly nowadays look towards culture, management style, and particularly the work content that they'll actually be dealing with on the day-to-day. Now, what this means is that if you want to attract that top talent, you not only need a competitive salary, you need to have the markers that show them that you will be a good place to work, and particularly that your culture is a place that they'll want to be a part of. And that's something that can be very difficult for some, and it is something very important, especially with the new generation of workers coming into the workforce. And another important thing to look at is what people are most unhappy with at the moment. So at the top of that, it's actually bonus schemes. Now, also from our statistics, we found that the majority of quality professionals don't receive a bonus usually. So there might be a connection there for why that came out on top. But particularly things to look at here are actually the next 3, which are career progression, training and development, and management style, are things people are unsatisfied with. Now, if you're seeing a lot of movement and people being unhappy with progression and development, that means that you need to invest more in those avenues of progression for your talent in order to keep people for the long term, essentially. And looking at who is most satisfied. Now, it might not be any surprise, but directors are actually leading the pack in terms of satisfaction from our survey. Satisfaction was measured on a scale of 0 to 10. It was self-reported, and we drag our numbers out from there. Now, it's interesting to look at because, like most industries, practitioners, so the entry-level positions, tend to be just about as satisfied as directors. Now, usually you see this in a lot of industries due to the fact that people come in, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, get worn down a little bit, then as things get better, they get more satisfied again. So it's a very common trend to see. Go to the next. And this is actually a really important thing to look at because of recent conversations a lot of companies are having. So when we look at home working and the amount of remote work available to workers, there's kind of a plateau in the data. So people who are in no home working situations are the least satisfied. But as we look up to about the 26% and higher, it begins to plateau at a higher rate of satisfaction. So this shows that you need to keep a careful balance there, especially as you're having those conversations with your workforce in terms of bringing people back to the office. Because there have been, especially recently, quite a few companies that have had walkouts due to bringing back office working requirements. So it's good to look at this and sort of keep in mind the fact that having a little bit is how you attract some people nowadays. And so this is our satisfaction by sector. Now, if you look at that, utilities, professional services, MEP, civils are all at the top. Meanwhile, automotive, highway, and retail will sit down towards the bottom. This may be due to cultural factors. It may be due to the fact that automotive and highway can be actually quite a rough situation to deal with in terms of some of the crashes, etc., that you have to deal with in terms of managing. Now, we do find that this follows a sort of similar trend across some other industries as well. So health and safety, for instance, follows a sort of similar trajectory for satisfaction. And we'll get into some of the other elements leading to this sort of scaling in a moment. But I'm sure everyone's probably found themselves on this chart and had a chance to look at it now. So we can probably move to the next slide. And this probably goes without saying, but it's something we always like to highlight, is that the question of when do you want to move to your next role directly correlates to individual satisfaction with a very significant variable. So looking at this, people who are the least satisfied, 4.3, want to move now. Now, that might not be any surprise. It might just be common sense, but it's something we very much have to highlight because it shows that in order to retain your talent and make sure they're there, you have to really focus on satisfaction and look at what's driving your people and what's driving your culture. And we'll get into that in the next bit. So how do we actually do that? How do we retain talent? How do we develop it? Is it a higher salary? Is it free gym? Is it beer in the fridge? You know, all these elements that some companies sometimes do to try and fix it don't really get to the core issues that help them retain talent. Go to the next slide. Because if we actually look at what we looked at previously in terms of what's important and what they're the most dissatisfied with, we can actually see that it is that culture, it is management style, it's progression, development. And as you can see, even management and culture style sit up there on the dissatisfaction scale with what people are currently dissatisfied with. So it's something that you have to target and you have to really take account. And especially looking at the data for this last year, it's becoming more and more prevalent and important to actually make sure that you don't have people leaving, especially in important positions. So how can we sort of help with that? So before I hand you off to Jess and sort of look at the salary numbers, I lead up the people and culture consulting team along with Nick, who's the director of the consulting service at SP. We deliver social cultural engagement surveying. So we actually look at culture, sort of get the numbers out there and give consultation on how to improve those. Go next. Management consulting, so helping get your managers up, get sort of the management going. Leadership development, so we do offer coaching for potential leaders, sort of bringing people up and especially looking at current leaders on ways to improve their sort of leadership, communications, etc. And then finally, development and succession planning. So this is something we've started doing quite a bit, sort of looking at existing teams, finding out where the gaps are, how can you sort of plan for succession, especially if you're looking towards retirement, ways to really sort of look at the future of your team, essentially. But that should be all from me now. I'll hand you over to Jess to look at the salaries.
Thanks, Jordan. So let's discuss salaries. So on this slide, you can see in red the average salary for quality professionals back in 2019. And in blue, you can see the average salaries for quality professionals in 2024. So it's clear to see there has been a significant increase. This could be due to inflation or increased focus on the quality profession, and that could be such like investments in like new projects or products, or possibly a combination of the two. We also added in grey the UK average salary, and this data was taken from Glassdoor. So in comparison to the quality profession, we can see that it's quite a well-paid career. So it's a good choice for those ones that did pick that. And I hope this information as well will be able to help you in your role benchmark yourself against the quality profession and your current career. And then we break it down, so average salaries per sector. So we've tried to cover all sectors as best as possible. We can see that commercial construction, energy, oil and gas are at the top of the highest paid sectors. And then at the bottom, we see food and healthcare. So I'd probably agree with this, just in my experience as well, working in this quality market, that works. So I've seen that quite often. And then on the next slide, we look at average salaries per sector, and we tie in the satisfaction piece. So you can see in red, these are the least satisfied sectors. So we have highways, retail and automotive. And in green, you can see the most satisfied, which is utilities, professional services, and MEP civils. And then we're going to move on to the average salary versus expected salary for a new position in 2024. So we asked what salary increase would you require in your next career move? And this came back at 21.9%. In grey, you can see the average salary versus in blue what people would expect for a new position. So if you are a hiring manager, in order to attract new talent, we should be looking at the figures in blue to make it competitive and attractive. And that will ensure you can get the best talent for your organisation. Also, we'd have to take into account the benefits package, such as car allowance, bonus, medical. All of those things play a factor. And but basic salaries can be flexible on that as well. So I would probably say most candidates generally, regardless to looking for a step up or not, so even a sideways move, I'd say to make a move, usually I'd say people are looking anywhere from 5,000, sometimes up to 10,000 to make a career move. And then gender diversity. So the profession is made up of 76% males versus 24% females. There's no surprise there. This has been a trend for quite some time. And the figures are exactly the same as what they were back in 2019, which was, I was surprised that they were exactly the same. You're kind of hoping for a small increase, but literally exactly the same as 2019. You can see a breakdown as well of the gender versus the job title. So we can see most females working in a quality role being in a manager or a specialist position. Including of specialists, you'd include auditors and that type of role as well. And then surprisingly as well, there's only one female director for every 11 male directors. So again, another shocking fact. So I'm going to pass over to Jordan finally for the last slide, and then I think we will open up for the Q&A. I've seen a lot of questions come in, so I'm going to pass you to Jordan. Or you're on mute, Jordan.
Sorry, I forgot to click the button. So looking at the final slide here, we're looking at the gender pay gap in the quality industry. So one thing that was actually quite surprising is compared to the UK average, the gender pay gap in the quality sector is actually surprisingly small. Now, when you look at it, it's actually an under 5%, which brings it into sort of statistical uncertainty, which means that there's no sort of statistically relevant gap in the pay. And in some levels, there's actually a higher rate of pay for female workers. Now, the thing to bring up is the fact that women are a very small minority of the quality sector. But what this does mean is that in terms of attracting more females towards the industry, it is important to look at the fact that it is a very equal sector. And that is something that should be driving that. Now, looking at the population on the last slide as well, we do need to bring more people into the sort of bottom level to sort of begin that sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, pipeline up towards directors in the future, and really sort of keep that talent going. Now, just in general, it is very healthy to see this. The UK average is actually about a 14.3% pay gap, if I remember correctly from the last salary report. So the quality sector is doing very well on this metric.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. That's the webinar finished, and that was our findings from the report that was published. Alex, did you want to facilitate the Q&A? And we're happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for that very interesting look at the outputs from the latest workforce insights. Do please keep your questions coming in. We've had plenty already, so I don't think we're going to be bored. But do take this opportunity to quiz the Shirley Parsons team about this work and any other questions arising. As we go through this, I'll be dipping into the Q&A box, pulling out some of the questions. So do bear with me if we have to do a bit of mental and logistical processing as we go through those questions. There have been a number of questions around, particularly around culture. I wondered if there are any insights or views that you have on the kind of cultural conditions that are behind these indications of satisfaction and indeed dissatisfaction in quality roles. And the same question around management behaviours. These were two key drivers behind dissatisfaction. Do we have any understanding of what the kind of management behaviours, or cultural conditions are driving these views?
Yeah, so one thing we found recently, and a lot of the research is backing up, is that this is one of the most diverse generations of work. So in terms of age groups and things like that. So you have people all the way from the baby boomers working with, Gen Z at the moment. And what that's led to is management style mismatch quite often, which leads to a lot of dissatisfaction. So you can't treat someone who's brand new to the workforce the same way as someone who's been around since, the 60s in the workforce. Now, because of that, you're leading to a lot of cultures that are clashing and managers that are sort of clashing with their workforce on that aspect. One of the things that we found in terms of consulting and sort of assisting in that has been teaching people to sort of take on the perspective of their clientele or sort of their employees, and sort of looking at how they can manage on an individual basis instead of a team basis, which is becoming a lot of the research nowadays as well, which is you have to sort of handle things on a case by case and not really a one size fits all model. In terms of general culture, with the pandemic, we saw a big shift into work at home, which led to people being a lot more independent. So the culture shifts when people went back to the office is a lot more focused on independence now, which has been, once again, a sort of clash with how things have been handled in the past.
Right. And I mean, I think it's probably an impossible question to answer, but what are the attributes, what are the artifacts of good culture versus poor culture?
Well, I think one of the
It's a
key
subject of
things,
another webinar, isn't it?
one of the key things we found is that the biggest indicator for good culture at the moment is high levels of psychological safety. So having the ability to freely report to your higher ups and sort of have that candor, sort of have those discussions with the rest of your team and your management. That's one of the key aspects at the moment. And that sort of feeds in beyond that foundationally to better communication, people being a lot happier and engaged, and having that level of behavioral output where they want to do more for the company and that emotional connection to the company. So that's what you really want to be looking at. And when we run engagement surveys and things like that, that's what we really focus on, because those are the key indicators you can actually put a number to at the moment.
And is there a generational difference there? Is that a metric? I think we tend to assume that those at the younger end of the job market tend to be more concerned, more passionate about that relationship, about that personal sense of feeling for their role and for the organization they work with. Does that apply here?
Yeah, you will find that especially sort of younger generation of workers are more focused on the emotional than salary or any other aspect. So people will actually, in the younger generation, take a role that they feel more connected to over a role that pays better or has better benefits.
Right.
So it's very much an important aspect for the newest generation. The older generations tend to focus more on sort of like title, benefits, salary usually, but the newer generation is sort of moving away from that now, surprisingly.
I suppose very, very pertinent to that, a question that's just come in is whether there's an increasing focus on sustainability, on social and environmental governance. Is that something that's of increasing concern when people are making choices about their career progression? And again, is there a generational aspect to that?
Yeah, I think the London School of Economics actually ran a survey on this the other day that showed that the younger generation usually prefer companies that outwardly show that they're taking steps towards sustainable processes, and usually avoid companies that are moving away from those. So oil and gas has had an issue recently with attracting talent sometimes due to the fact that people don't want to be associated with it, essentially. But that's mainly just on the younger generation who are very conscious of those sort of movements and ideas.
Interesting. And I suppose there is an argument to be made that those in the quality profession who wish to see change in such industries are probably best positioned to do so from within as without. So it needn't necessarily be a barrier to people looking at working in, for example, oil and gas. We've spoken a bit about age, about demographics. I don't wish to sound obsessed by it, but I think it's a very interesting area here. Did the survey discover any insights regarding demographics? Is the profession getting younger? Is it getting older? Is there a plateau? That question's just come in.
Jordan, I don't think that was on the
we didn't collect that demographic data.
No.
But imagine, Jess or Omar, you maybe have a idea of probably seeing that through candidates.
Yeah, I think especially it's from the talk we did at CQI Live, we were asked the question, how do we attract new talent? So I think in people's minds there's this perception that we're struggling, or we're struggling to find new talent. And when you say new talent, you kind of assume like the up and comers and in the younger generation. But actually, I think that there isn't necessarily a shortage of quality professionals. They're across the board. I think it's just being open-minded with kind of your hiring and taking people from different sectors is really important. But yeah, we see a real range, right through from early 20s through to late 60s, to be honest with you. And we still putting people into roles at the age of late 60s, and this sometimes maybe more in the contracting world, but it's really it is very much a widespread. I wouldn't be able to say, oh, there's more in certain areas, but it is, yeah, it's actually quite interesting. It's an exciting profession, and I think there's more and more younger people coming in because they can see the benefits and they can see the impact they can have within an organization. If an organization has got their quality right and at the forefront of their business, it entices people within that organization to want to be a part of that and step into it as well.
I think there are a couple of quite interesting things in what you've said there, Jess. First of all, that you are placing candidates who are longer in the tooth or a little bit older. There continue to be options for career progression, career change, regardless of age. So you could view that as quality being a dynamic career choice with longevity and lots of options along that career path, regardless of where you are on the journey.
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that we touched on was that demographic issue, and how anecdotally we often perceive quality professionals as, without wishing to sound rude, pale, male and stale. But what you're suggesting there is that it is much more diverse than that.
Yes, so in terms of the age, absolutely. And I think we obviously mentioned in the gender diversity slide that it is definitely more predominant with males, and it has been for many years. But I think like the key points to take away are that women coming into the profession, they can see that there is career progression, and that there is there isn't much in terms of a pay gap. So there's a lot of things that can empower women to join the quality market. So yeah, it's definitely. I think hopefully in the future, if we can. I think again it comes down to organizations taking quality seriously, and as quality as a profession evolves, I think as that as the profession grows and evolves and becomes more visible, I think that essentially will bring in new talent as well, and hopefully more women as well.
And I suppose the more that we can do to showcase the diversity within the profession, the more likely it is for people to recognise opportunities for people like them within it, and thus encourage themselves to consider careers in quality.
Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about diversity now. I'm going to continue along that theme, but rather than diversity in demographics, we've had a question in about diversity in role. And we know that the scope of the quality profession of the quality professional is evolving. We're entering, or we're in a job market where cross-functional working is increasingly important. Are we seeing that much in the kind of roles that you're recruiting for? Is there greater demand for traditional quality management roles? Is there more demand for project management? Is there more kind of diversity in the portfolio of the roles that you're seeing?
It's a good question. So the answer would be, what we're seeing, probably no. So I would say, it is a typical case by case basis, but in terms of like multidisciplined roles or taking on kind of other responsibilities from different functions within a business, I would say obviously you still have quite the traditional QHSE or HSEQ positions, for example. I'd say there's fewer and fewer of those as the years go on, but they still are very much there at the moment. And again, that's obviously looking at usually within a smaller organization, you would maybe have somebody who's multidisciplined looking at all of those. And then, yeah, and I think from larger organizations that I speak with, they have definitely been looking at splitting out their quality division as a separate entity, and they've have people within those focusing on certain areas. So auditors specifically focusing on auditing, the management looking after kind of the maybe the assurance and the strategic piece, working with those senior leadership teams, and then kind of the engineers as well doing a lot more of like the doing. But no, I would say you're going to get, again, a case by case basis, but different companies, depending on size, maybe where they want to incorporate, maybe, for example, like R&D or operations or that kind of element. But it is traditionally the roles I work on are very, very much kind of what they say they are. So around the quality job title is what they say they are. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Do keep sending your questions in. We still have plenty to get through, but do take the opportunity to pose them. While I'm just having a quick look through here, we have a question about engagement from sectors that weren't covered in the research. Are we seeing a shift in where quality roles are being advertised? Where are there emerging sectors that are looking for quality talent to join them? I suppose project management is fairly well established, but IT, cybersecurity, or the technology space, is this a growth area for quality in your experience, in your insight?
I think it's starting to be, yeah. So the AI side of things is definitely becoming more and more spoken about. Nothing specific in terms of like newly created job roles for quality professionals, but the sectors, it's maybe more on that IT. Data centers as well are becoming more predominant as well within Europe. So more and more quality roles are being created in that space. And the construction and civils market is just booming because of kind of the way things are in this country at the moment. So they're continuously growing and booming. But Jordan, have you got anything else to add on that as well? I mean, that's from my experience.
Yeah, with our survey, of course, we can only look at what data we get. So in the case of there were quite a few sectors where we only had a couple of respondents. So we did have to remove them just because it wasn't statistically valid to only have 2 or 3 people respond from one sector. So in terms of the numbers we have, it's just from what we saw. Now, of course, that means there's probably a larger pool of people in those sectors is the reason we saw more respondents from them. But yeah, you do tend to see a lot more talk, like Jessica said, about AI, elements like that are on the forefront of a lot of companies at the moment.
And I suppose one of the key issues in addressing those areas is that focus on professional development, on quality professionals understanding what the new and emerging areas are and making sure that they're developing the knowledge, skills, and behaviours to address them.
Definitely.
Okay, to take a slightly different tack, if I may, We have a question here around organizational psychology. Organizational psychology is very interesting. I'd hardly agree with that. What type of psychometrics and testing models do you use?
So in my work, there's so many of them at this point, but in my work, we mainly use for any kind of personality profiling or tools like that, we use a 5-factor model. But we've gone beyond that a little bit in the recent year where we started working with workplace safety profiling. We've started using some more of like Shuck's work on engagement and cultural analysis. So it's a very interesting field, but it does mean that there's about 900 different metrics that we actually use in the day-to-day. But usually the way that we've been doing our work, and especially when I do anything with my clients, is we sit down and find the right sort of psychometric for the job more than anything. But we do have a couple in our toolbox, like the 5-factor model that we tend to use in the day-to-day.
So not a straightforward question to answer.
It's really difficult because there's so many different sort of, it's like you can put the circle in the square hole, but you want to make sure you have the square first before you shove it in there.
And that's a very interesting approach to recruitment, isn't it? Not looking simply at experience qualifications, but really understanding that fit with organizations, which I suppose speaks very much to culture and the importance of the culture of an organization as driving satisfaction. Do you see, I mean, have since employing this kind of psychometric organizational psychometrics, do you see any kind of increase in satisfaction, increase in engagement, longevity of careers, or is that data not really available?
So we've been using MAP for just over 2 years at Shirley Parsons in terms of the recruitment process when we use psychometrics in recruitment. Now, one of the main things I do when I discuss it with the client is I always ask them, well, what's the culture of the team? What kind of culture are you looking for? And then I have that discussion and sort of look at the profiles of candidates in that sort of format. Now, what we've actually found is that the retention rate's higher, the engagement rate's higher. We've been doing follow-up surveying on that. And usually people are in their job for 2+ years. Now we've actually got over 2 years of data at a much higher rate than the average placement.
Mm-hmm.
So we are finding that taking that extra step to make sure you're making a good cultural fit really helps with that long-term investment, we find.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's a really important point. And I was lucky enough to have you guys show me the map tool some time ago, and it really is a very fascinating dimension to the recruitment process.
Sorry, Alex, one thing to add on that, I think we missed out, was the MAP tool is essentially a psychometric test, but it's specifically focused on the QHSE profession. So it can benchmark yourself against the QHSE profession. So it's not just your average psychometric test, it is bespoke with Shirley Parsons, where you can like benchmark yourself against what good looks like in those QHSE fields. So it's tailored and it's very good.
Excellent, thank you. To continue in a similar vein, do you have any recommendations on how to improve the psychological safety in an organization? And this is something that you mentioned earlier on, Jordan.
Yeah, it's sort of a uphill battle for some companies because it depends on what the base culture of the company is. But when I've done training and I've run quite a few workshops for clients on this, is we focus a lot on sort of openness, sort of creating those channels of communication. So especially looking at comms and sort of the way that people are communicating internally. And it really comes down to, and you look through my LinkedIn, if you look me up, they've got quite a few articles I've written on it now. It comes down to candor, sort of opening up channels for communication and really showing authenticity in the way that you communicate with your team. So making sure that they understand you care and that you want to listen to them, and making sure that any criticism you give is constructive rather than destructive when you're delivering it. That's how you sort of help foster that psychological safety within teams.
Mm-hmm. There are a number of questions here about transferable skills, but also about movement between industries. I'm going to try and kind of bundle that together because I think they're related. To what extent do you see a transfer of quality professionals between different industries? And is industry knowledge more important than quality? Or is it that transferable skill set, is that easy to apply regardless?
Not as much as we'd like to see, to be honest with you. I touched on it earlier, but there it does happen. So clients are open to seeing quality professionals from different sectors, but usually it tends to be so for example, the construction or civil sectors, they like to see the people from those sectors, but they're open to others. So it could be utilities or power transmissions, oil and gas, but it kind of still stays within that kind of field of civils and construction, and they kind of maybe wouldn't go as far into like the manufacturing industry as such, and vice versa. I think manufacturing don't really tend to look at quality professionals in the construction industry, because they think there's too much of a too much of a difference in those sectors. But again, manufacturing clients are open to seeing candidates from like services sectors and logistical sectors and that kind of area. So it's transferable, and people are willing to be open, but it's still kind of like separated a bit as well from like construction and like the manufacturing side. But yes, I think that, when you speak to great people and speak to quality professionals, and at the end of the day, they're technically sound. They know what they're talking about. They're keen, and so much more. You think, well, they could definitely do the role if someone gave them the chance to try a complete brand new different sector, and they'd pick it up pretty quickly. These aren't most. Well, it's a real mix. Some quality professionals do have an industry background in terms of like maybe degree qualified or have been in it for X amount of years, and they maybe want to stay within that, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people that don't have that as well, so they can, they're happy to transfer and try new things out. So I think trying to raise that awareness of being more open would be good for the profession.
It's really good for the sort of transfer of knowledge, because some sectors are more advanced in certain aspects than others. So you might be bringing in someone with a completely different view set, and they'll help, grow the quality in your industry, things like that. So it's really good to actually think outside the box, I think, sometimes with those, especially since it already happens at the highest levels of employment, usually up in the director levels. People move industry and sector all the time. So
yeah, and the opportunity to learn from other sectors, other experiences must be absolutely invaluable, particularly where you see quality professionals increasingly having to work across organisations and with more diverse and complex supply chains. I imagine that would only be to their advantage. On to a couple of more slightly specific questions, I suppose. Do you have a sense of how the market is viewing qualifications, particularly CQI certifications, CPD records? To what extent are qualifications, quality specific qualifications, a prerequisite for roles in quality?
So as we know, this actually comes up quite a lot. So in terms of qualifications as such, the one that I get asked for as kind of a non-negotiable would be the lead auditor 9001. That comes up most, or if not in the 9, potentially like 27, or whatever kind of specific standard we're discussing. That tends to come up the most. I mean, I think I've only once in my 6 years of recruiting quality professionals been asked for somebody with a degree, the quality master's degree. So just put that into perspective, really. And then it's really all about experience. One thing that is becoming more apparent is clients are asking for a CQI membership, and they are actually asking for, even putting kind of levels in. They have, chartered as a minimum as well, similar to kind of what they do on like IOSH as well. And the health and safety sector, they absolutely do that. So I'm seeing that more and more. It's very much about experience. And if someone has a qualification in an industry, or maybe a transferable qualification, that always does support the application. Engineering being probably the main one, some kind of an engineering background qualification and supports. And then you have more niche roles in maybe, for example, like the M&E sector, you know, having those like qualifications. So you're like CSIPs, you know, your kind of like certificates in welding, mechanical, and the same in like electrical. Having those kind of qualifications is essential, but kind of generally still comes down to very much your experience and yeah, what you have to offer.
But it's extremely encouraging to hear you say that people are looking for CQI membership, particularly chartered membership. We are at time, so I think that's an excellent note to end on. He says selfishly. But before I do so, are there any final remarks, final points that you'd like to make before we bring this session to a close?
No, that was it really. I think thank you everyone for joining. I think we've had some really good numbers today as well. I know this is the second one I've done, so yeah, it's been great to have everybody on. And like I say, if you are a candidate looking for you know, looking for your next career move, please get in touch with myself or Omar. And again, if you're a hiring manager at the moment struggling to find a quality audit professional, please do get in touch and we can have a conversation. That's it.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm aware that there are questions that we didn't get around to answering. Thank you so much for submitting so many. We will take a look through these. We'll share them with the team at Shirley Parsons and see if we can provide some additional answers for you. But may I just close by saying thank you very much to Jessica, Ben, Omar and Jordan from Shirley Parsons.